We've seen Trump's peace plan for Gaza. That is nothing short of a colonial partition of Gaza. And it's incredible because we need to talk again of another elite criminal, former British Prime Minister and war criminal Tony Blair. He is playing a significant role in this new governing of Gaza, a third country in the Middle East. And my question to you, how should we understand the role of Tony Blair in this governing? And we know Blair led the UK into the Iraq war on the basis of a deliberate, orchestrated lie that it was later proved by an independent investigation. He knew that Saddam Hussein had no chemical weapons, there was not a threat. And we would expect him to be fully banned from the political life, but he's not banned, he's being rewarded with Gaza. How does Blair get his foot again in the door? Whose interest is he serving? What do we know for our foreign audience of how come Blair comes here as a savior, a war criminal?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly been part of the discussions. You know, it's kind of gone back and forth because when there was the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire, which, you know, I'm sure we'll get onto, but you know, when there was an agreement between Palestinian resistance factions and the Trump administration, essentially. You know, I mean, this speaks to the question of U.S. empire and the unity between the Israeli regime and the U.S. empire. But there was talk of Tony Blair being a kind of neocolonial governor for the Gaza Strip. And then when the ceasefire was signed, Trump kind of rolled that back a bit. You know, he said on the day that he flew into Tel Aviv for his speech, which I watched in full for my sins, in Air Force One, when he was asked about Tony Blair, he said, well, you know, we'll have to see about Tony Blair because, you know, not everybody likes him, kind of thing. So he was talking about the, I mean, my read on that is he was talking about the Qataris and so forth, who, you know, whose pocket he's also in, as well as the Israel lobby's pocket in terms of people like, in terms of mainly Miriam Adelson, the inheritor of Sheldon Adelson's casino billions and his pro-Israel empire. But so, you know, it seems for the moment Tony Blair, the war criminal, is out of the picture. But like it, as far as I know, you know, but obviously, you know, Trump's so erratic. I guess it could be brought back at any time. But you know, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Tony Blair is very likely. However, you know, the UN, the plan that was agreed at the UN Security Council, and what Trump now wants to happen in Gaza, and what the Israelis want to happen in Gaza, and what the Palestinian Authority has agreed to in Gaza, it has to be said, because the Palestinian Authority is a collaborationist entity with the Israeli occupation, and it always has been. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of neo-colonial occupation of the Gaza Strip. That's what they want to happen, and the Israelis, you know, with this yellow line, they are still occupying a massive swathe of the Gaza Strip, and they're still carrying on genocidal actions in the Gaza Strip, as well as in the West Bank. So
to give some sort of context for that, so the supposed historic ceasefire, in quotations, guys, was announced on October 10th of this year. And of course, Trump declared it. He declared it, presenting it as the first step in his broader 20-point peace plan, which I suppose we're seeing now that has been backed by the UN that you're talking about. But also, since then, reports say that Israel has committed nearly 500 violations. So that's just in 6 weeks. They've committed over 500 violations, killing over 340 civilians and injuring hundreds more. Of course, this is on top of all the other siege, like starvation, stuff like that, situation that they're facing. But this peace plan that we've talked about, we've called it a farce. The UN-backed peace plan, we covered it last week. It implements a UN-mandated transitional administration with Trump Board of Peace overseeing governance. And like we mentioned earlier in this show, it's quite ridiculous to have the genocidal force, essentially because of U.S. active participation in the genocide in Gaza, being the one that is also supposed to oversee governance and peace. It's completely ridiculous. And what it does is it makes the U.S.'s active participation actually in this genocide official. Till 2027. Now there's an actual official status for them. Can you help us unpack the realities of the situation? And what does this mean?
Yeah, I think you've summed it up well there. Just yesterday, Amnesty International, yesterday or the day before, Amnesty International said, this isn't just, let's be realistic, like this is what is still happening in Gaza. The genocide is still ongoing. That's absolutely the case. You could potentially argue it's maybe slowed down a little bit, but it's, maybe there aren't quite as many people being killed every day in the Gaza Strip by Israel as there was before the ceasefire. You could argue that, but Amnesty International this week stated that Israel is still committing a genocide in Gaza despite the so-called ceasefire. This is not just us at Empire Watch saying that. It's not just people on Twitter saying that. This is the reality of what's happening to people on the ground in Gaza in terms of bombings, in terms of Israeli soldiers carrying out massacres of civilians deliberately, drone strikes, and more important, almost more tellingly in a way, is the fact that Palestinians are still being denied any kind of aid that they need. People are still being starved. The aid deliveries that are being permitted and under the Israeli siege conditions are still far less than what is needed. This is the third year now, the third winter that Palestinians in Gaza have gone through this genocide, and the tents that they have, that refugees have, are and these are multiple generational refugees who have been displaced time and time and time again since 1948. The tents that they have had to use since 7th of October 2023 are now collapsing. They're under the third winter. So people are, as well as being bombed and directly genocided, are being genocided by lack of adequate shelter, food, medicine, and so forth. And this is systemic and deliberately being carried out by the Israelis, with now the direct involvement of the Americans and the British military in terms of spy flights and so forth. It's like you said, it's the idea that there's a board of peace by the genocider, by the genocidal powers. It's nonsensical. But the silver lining to all of this terrible situation is the fact that they can say they're going to impose this board of peace, and they can say they're going to there's not going to be any Palestinian involvement in the governance of Gaza except for collaborators like the Palestinian Authority or the criminal ISIS gangs that they arm in Gaza. But none of that is realistic, because the reality on the ground is, despite what the Americans want to do, Hamas governance structures, the Palestinian government structures in the Gaza Strip, are still are still intact. That's the de facto reality on the ground. That's just what's happening. And so that it's kind of all this sport of peace stuff and the things about Palestinian resistance organizations disarming and so forth. It's really, it's wish casting.
Is wish casting, or do you think it's deliberately made to fail, and for Trump just to pretend I am the peacemaker of the world? What do you think? Do you think they believe in their own plan?
I don't know. That's a good question. These things are sort of created by committee, right? So I guess they want these things to happen, but it's not happening. That's the way I look at it. I'm not that motivated by I'm not that bothered by what they believe.
Right. Because most of the thing is like 90% marketing. Just seems like,
yeah, and like if the so-called Great Plan for Gaza, that if you read that a few months ago before the ceasefire, I think it was in September when that came out, it was all made by AI. Like the diagrams in it and the images in it, it looked like something from Dubai, right? That there was going to be this new Gaza, and that Hamas will disarm, Palestinian resistance will disarm, and there'll be a new Trump Gaza, essentially, Trump Elon Musk style sort of Gaza, but it's all an illusion.
It was a real estate plan, like pitch deck.
That's what it was. I think that's what he wants. Trump. Who knows what Trump wants? He's an erratic manager of empire, I think. But he's, like every U.S. president, increasingly in recent years, it's they're just frontmen who don't really, in a way, they don't seem to have much power. It's more about the system.
Right. There's a trajectory that they are just sort of adding on a different face to, but the trajectory's already been set, which is just more and more belligerence for U.S. empire.